But I'd like to ask Dominic Stillhardt from the ICRC also to see how do you overcome the barriers, and what are the barriers when it comes to leadership in mental health?
Thank you, Dick, and good morning to all of you. Really happy to be here together with you now. Dick, I think looking from my own experience and perspective, it is really important, first and foremost, for us as leaders to constantly advocate for mental health being as important, if not more important, than physical health. And whilst that sounds like a bit of a, we kind of almost take it a little bit for granted now. You know, when I started with this organization 30 years ago, all we were looking for is physical, war wounded. That was kind of our main focus. And nobody ever spoke about the mental health of any of the victims of conflict and violence that we encountered in our humanitarian response. And I also agree with Javier that we have made significant progress in that regard. I also think it is important that we systematically integrate mental health and psychosocial support in all our activities, and do not just build siloed programs, because that is not going to generate the kind of results that we want to see. In other words, if I look at my own organization, mental health and psychosocial support is now increasingly mainstream across all activities, hospital services, missing, visiting detainees, and so on and so forth. And just recently, I saw a heartwarming activity and program for kids that have returned from Al-Hol, and they have seen hell during the time with the Islamic State group, especially towards the end of that fighting. And today we are running about 260 programs across all our operations, and I really think that is a testimony to the progress that we have made in terms of mental health. Now, in terms of barriers, one is clearly the stigma and the preconceptions that still exist, especially in many of the countries in which we are working, including, of course, also in our own organization. Because if you think about mental health, very often you associate it with trauma, with psychiatry, with drugs, and so on and so forth. And therefore, it is really important that we start with ourselves to overcome some of the stigma. And that is also not obvious. And again, I think it's only in the past 5 or 10 years, we really started to deal with mental health of our own staff, mental health of helpers. And if I look at the helpers programs again there, we have made tremendous progress. In 2020, we supported more than 7,000, nearly 8,000 helpers who are confronted, as Richard rightly pointed out, with extremely stressful situations. And one other barrier that has not yet been mentioned is really the cultural difference. And we need to first acknowledge and provide for cultural differences in dealing with mental health. And we cannot just come and apply Western standard kind of mental health services all over the place. And therefore, it is hugely important to work with communities, to integrate them in the response, and to find meaning in their suffering, in their loss, because that is, I think, the only way we can provide for some of these important cultural differences.
Come back to a few of these matters later on as well, and I could really hear from from your field experience, which is many years. I know it's also that the policy that we have now drafted is also including these as aspects, and they are so important. And also happy to hear all of you being human and also sharing, and I think that is so important. Now I'd like to go on and invite John Labor from Sudan Red Cross Society is not online, so sorry. And Michaela, I throw the ball to you then.
Yeah. Yes, it's a pity because it's also, I mean, testimonies really where the action is happening. They are extremely interesting and pave the way to the answers afterwards. But I'm very happy to take the place of Anna and then leave Anna tell us her experience in Ukraine. So how do we bring theory to action? And I think, and Dominic did name it, we do have today 260 programs when it comes to MHPSS, and that is not something that was like that 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we started with 10, and it was not an easy journey to really bring consciousness of the need of MHPSS in our activities in the different programs that we have. And I'm looking at Milena that has been with us this last period and this 10 years periods where the increase in the number of programs have been quite exponential. But that took a lot of work in terms of sensitizing not only us, but the communities in which we work on the added value of the MHPSS components. A lot has to do with how we approach matters. And I think that in that case, we in the ICRC and specifically in context, we always tried to look at the MHPSS component as a part of a whole and not necessarily a unique activity that it's a little bit isolated from the rest. Dominique, you did mention this idea of the transversality of it. A project that is vertical and it's only MHPSS will lack probably plenty of other aspects that people are suffering from, and the MHPSS component will not be able to tackle those. So the way we are doing it in the ICRC, specifically with the context in which we are, conflict and other kinds of violence, it's very much in this transversal idea of MHPSS as an integral part of a program, could be health, could be protection, where we, one way or the other, try to look into the MHPSS inside hospitals, inside the services that we provide at PHCs, inside the health of detainees. But as I said, in terms of the protection activities that the ICRC is, how do we incorporate MHPSS in the programs on family of missing persons, child protection, sexual violence. So the idea of not looking at it as a standalone pillar, but really as a transversal activity for which the person will gain a holistic approach to it. So I think that that is how we have been doing so in the last 10 years. As you see, from 10 to 260, it's a very big increase. We are very happy with the achievements so far. But it's true that we need to continue with this approach. We need, and there's much more to do. COVID has crystallized that. Whenever a pandemic as this one, really the mental health aspect is one pillar that cannot be forgotten or left for the end. Our minds need to trigger the mental health and psychosocial support as an initial response and not necessarily as a later one. So I think that with that answer, I hope that Anna can give us a little bit the experience in Ukraine.
Anna, I can see in the chat that you're back, and there we can see you again. So from Michaela's view, it sounds rather smooth and easy, and we know it can be challenging as well, but how are you working with integration of psychosocial support in your operations in Ukraine currently?
Okay, thank you. Hello everyone, one more time. I'm sorry for the problems with internet. So yeah, I will share our experience in psychosocial support development, and for Ukraine, it's a new direction, I would say, because we started to do it only from 2014, and it's 7 years has passed since that, and in 2018 we developed PSS unit, who was like responsible for all MHPSS activities in our national society, and also now psychosocial support is one of the core activity of Ukrainian Red Cross, and we included into our strategy for 2025 and also to our national plan of the development, and we try like to do it in different levels to integrate MHPSS. So we was working with development of some standards for our volunteers and staff, how to provide psychosocial support to different types of beneficiaries, because we work in like from 2014 when we started to develop it, we work mainly with internally displaced people, because it was like the main problem that we have armed conflict in the east of Ukraine. So started from working with internally displaced people and their families. Now we are working also with internally displaced people, but we start to work more with vulnerable people from local communities, also demobilized servicemen and family members of demobilized servicemen, as well as we try to involve community to the to help vulnerable people to integrate more easily to the communities. And
Can I ask you a question there about the communities and how you are received by them when you address these kind of questions, and also maybe your perspective on the stigma there, and how is it dealt with in general?
It depends, and also like problems which we have, it also it very depends from different regions of Ukraine, and also those needs that are in concrete regions. So for example, at the beginning when conflict started and we have a lot of IDPs came to the like different regions, so there was some like problems when local people do not want to help IDPs. Of course, some of them helped, but still there was some tension in the society. But we tried to integrate, for example, IDPs together with local people in order to make something which will be needed for this like community where IDPs residing, and it also helped to build a better relationship between them. And now we also like work, for example, in some regions with Roma population, and also try to make some initiatives where we can involve them with like other members of the communities. But it's like speaking about community psychosocial support, but we also try to develop other like direction and integrate psychosocial support to other activities of the Ukrainian Red Cross. So now we are working on like basic knowledge in psychological first aid in order to make them make possible to receive them to all staff and volunteers who work with beneficiaries in different kind of humanitarian support provision, and also with our emergency response teams who provide support as well as psychological first aid during like some emergencies. And also we try to integrate started to integrate like psychosocial support to the like visiting nurses services. So we started to teach our volunteers and staff who provide this visit to our beneficiaries, to teach them on psychological first aid, so they will be able to provide also some PFA during these visits, and not only like social support.
Thanks, Anna. This is really great achievements, and congratulations on all of these achievements during such a short period of time. And I can hear that you really setting your goals high. I'd like to pursue into the, I mean, we're talking about integration of mental health and psychosocial support. on a very practical level, on the volunteer level and staff level, but also when it comes to integrating, the ambition is to integrate MHPSS, or at least psychosocial support, into all programs and sectors in the movement. And I now would like to invite also Signe Øe Andersen from the Danish Red Cross, who is Head of International Programs, and also ask Michaela and also Claire Clemens from the British Red Cross, who is Director for International Law and Policy, to join the conversation on what are the main challenges when it comes to programs and also the opportunities when it comes to addressing MHPSS into all sectors. Can I start with Signe?
You can see I'm about to say something. Yes, I really think, which has already come out of other speakers, is that there's a lot of things that needs to come together for us to deliver on this commitment. And when you look at that challenge and the ambition we have to actually transform our programs and to integrate, to have integrated MHPSS in our action, that takes commitment, and it takes commitment on several levels. I think I would just highlight a few that I find particularly important. In our common continued advocacy and talks with donors, we really need to bring this priority into play and be part of not only transforming our program, but also transforming the opportunities we have to apply for funding for what we're doing. So that I
the
think
sound quality is very bad. Sorry, can I interrupt you? The sound quality is very bad, and we could hardly hear you. Is there anything you could do with the microphone? And maybe I can hand over.
How is it going now?
Much better, much better.
Okay,
oh, thanks.
okay.
Sorry.
I'll move
Thank you
very
so
close. Sorry. Yeah. So just mentioning that one of the things I think we need to do in order to have MHPSS integrated into our programs and really have transformed the way we do programming. It's not only to have our competencies in place and have guidelines and capacities that know what we need to do, but it also this crucial element of having a real conversation with our back donors and have a joint continued advocacy to allow for also the opportunities to be there to find the funding that allow us to move forward on this. And another thing I think is really important here is also that evidence on how MHPSS, not only in its own right, is important and is a result that we are heading and we are aiming at, but also as a means to an end. Integrating MHPSS into other programs actually is a catalyst for better results. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to if we also bring forward the evidence on how integrated programming actually provides us with an opportunity to do much better in all sectors. So those are two elements I think that are vital to bringing forward integrating MHPSS in our program.
Yes, thanks, Signe. And we have questions in the chat, and we will come back to them. And Gracie from Panama, we can see that we will address this question to Anna later on. So please bear with us. We will come back to it. Claire Clement from the British Red Cross, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Dick, very much. I hope you can hear me okay.
Very well.
Great, perfect. So I'm Director of International Law and Policy here at the British Red Cross, and as the title suggests, I'm certainly not a technical expert in this area, but I do absolutely see the strong linkages between the operational work and the technical expertise of our psychosocial and mental health team, led by the wonderful Sarah Davidson, who's online this morning, of course, and the policy work in my area on building resilience. My teams are also responsible for coordinating the British Red Cross's preparation and engagement for the international statutory meetings. So we obviously have a strong interest in how these resolutions progress. Now, to meet the ambition of integrating a basic level of MHPSS across programs and sectors in the movement by 2023 will require us all to accelerate our efforts both within our organisations and also collectively. We have to strengthen our partnerships and greater sharing of expertise both across the movement, including on training and tools, but we also need to think about how we can more effectively utilise partnerships and expertise external to the movement, wherever that's appropriate. We should pool our experience and invest more in movement-wide resource centres. So establishing a movement MHPSS hub that is appropriately resourced will enhance our movement's capacity and coherence of approach in this field. It would also generate research and help us to build the evidence base that's already been mentioned, to inform our operations and also to support our humanitarian diplomacy efforts in this area. Now, I lead an area that's heavy on government engagement, as I'm sure many of you do. So naturally, I think it would be really useful to foster closer cooperation and specific partnerships with governments. Now, in Resolution 2 of the 33rd International Conference, states also committed to integrating mental health and psychosocial support into all activities addressing humanitarian needs. So the resolution additionally explicitly encourages states and national societies to enhance their cooperation, building on national societies' humanitarian access and our auxiliary role. So this gives a strong impetus for more joined up work between national societies and states in our auxiliary function, and we should take full advantage of this as a platform. Now, resourcing remains a key challenge to facilitate broader integration of MHPSS across the movement programs and sectors. Our own fantastic BRC team manages an enormous portfolio of work, both towards our own staff and volunteers, government departments, other stakeholders, while relying mostly on external funding sources. So the movement collectively could consider enhanced efforts and new strategies to promote and disseminate the centrality and critical importance of MHPSS within our programs, in particular to donors, as has also already been mentioned, and to other stakeholders, both nationally for all of us and at the global level. The commitments made by the movement and governments in Resolution 2, as I've already mentioned, really provide a strong basis for this enhanced diplomacy. And finally, just back to the evidence base, movement partners could support one another to instigate and share evaluations and learning from their MHPSS activities. And this would help to demonstrate in concrete terms the impact that they're having. Our own BRC team undertook an external evaluation of its own services by one of our government executive agencies here in the UK, Public Health England. And this really helped to evaluate the impact and benefit the team's activities have on our frontline workforce. Thanks very much, Steve.
Thank you so much, Claire. And I've heard this morning that many of you are also coming back to the current pandemic and the global crisis that it is. But it's also with all these crises that it comes an opportunity. And talking about implementation of these instruments and integrating MHPSS is, as also Javier started with, has been also an opportunity. And maybe, Javier, if I may come back to you on this, what is your take on this of integrating across, and what is your experience on addressing barriers in that sense?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. Look, the point of integration is a fact that is needed. The question is how much we open our eyes to those facts. Let me give you one example. The marathons in Afghanistan. When you go to the marathons of Afghanistan, what you see is the most depressive human life.
May I ask you, Javier, I'm familiar with the marathons, but maybe you could just explain what it is.
Okay, so the marathons, you know, are centers that are hosting people mentally affected by the conflict, people that is women that have been affected by the conflict, that are single women with the children, and are also marathons that you have only for orphans or elderly people. So it are different marathons. But when you see in the marathons, when with the expression of the former Secretary General of Afghanistan Red Crescent Society, he said, when he was asked a question, how do you operate in your country, your national society? He said something very powerful. He said, the only thing that I know that I have is a battalion of widows, mentally ill, and orphans that we have to support. And to me, this is a powerful statement in terms of saying, if this is it, how we are integrating these activities into the needs. And when we see the mental health in the marathons, we could do a lot, and it has been so difficult to sustain the marathons to the level that they should be. This is just as a bracket, but to your question, if we look mental health across, I think is essential. But at the same time, we have to ensure that mental health, it is a topic that drives, it has to be a connection with resilience. If it's mental health in isolation is important, it's help, but it has to have a connection for the individual resilience as a key component to do. If it is not connected, then the integration, it is a missed opportunity. And if I made, I just want to connect also with the points on the partnerships. You know, many national societies have done partnerships with universities. And when they have grown in partnership with universities, immediately those national societies have really stepped up. And integration does not happen because many times we are talking about one person or two persons in charge of doing something. But when we see the national resources from a wider perspective, we can bring the academia together with us. Our capacity to integrate is 10 times better and possible than when we look ourselves in isolation as a Red Cross. And I think that the cultural shift is to say, we are the enablers to bring knowledge, expertise on this area through humanitarian lens. And in that way, we can do really a full integration of mental health. Otherwise, it's a good desire, good wish, but if we don't shift within the national society's leadership to say, where are the resources in your domestic context, and very much linked to Dominique's point of view of the culture as a key component, to say, where are the resources, your human resources, your talent in your country, your capacities in your country, and how that capacity can go to all the services we provide. And it's crucial to do that, and I think that is possible.
Thank you so much. And I think in terms of human resources, the policy is also addressing the human resources as the key component in success here. And I think one of the challenges that we are addressing and will be addressing is the diversified workforce, both in terms of the millions of volunteers that we want to provide the mental health and psychosocial support services, and also staff. And I'd like to come back to Anna, but also to invite Jane Holman from the Australian Red Cross, who is the chief, I'm reading because you have a fancy title, so I'm reading here the Chief People and Culture Officer of the Australian Red Cross. So maybe Jane, you can start addressing this human resources challenge that we're also facing in terms of diversity and quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of the work that we've been doing is training people. So in our emergency services groups, for example, you know, the base set of training that our staff and volunteers get that are part of that is in psychological first aid and self-care and wellbeing. And we are doing that, trying to do that rollout across the organisation. So I think from a HR perspective, I look at it and think it's got to be both bringing people in who have those skills and making that part of it, but it's developing it. It's developing that resilience, developing those skills in our staff and in our volunteers to be able to deal with particularly challenging situations that they're going to see out in the field or with clients or just as part of their work. We've certainly seen it in Australia in the last 2 years, particularly in the city that I'm in, which is Melbourne, sustained very, very lengthy lockdowns because of COVID, which really impacted the mental health of our staff. So we had to put a lot of interventions in place in order to give them the tools to be able to deal with being locked in their homes for months on end and not being able to see people. So for us, it's all about building the skill capability in our people so that they can help themselves, as well as, you know, it's important to partner with external vendors and external people, but it's building that capability in our people has been a real focus for us.
Thanks. Anna, if you're still online from Ukraine, also, how are you managing the human resources side? You told us a little bit how you did your trainings on psychosocial first aid, psychological first aid, excuse me, and so on. And is the line okay?
Yes, hello. I hope you can hear me. As I was mentioned, and I agree that human resource is a main point for the provision of MHPSS because you need to prepare staff and volunteers who will do it. And usually this activities is not very costly, but you need to spend a lot of money to prepare volunteers and staff. And as I was mentioned in 2018, like all this integration process, integration development of more MHPSS component and to make it stronger started, and as well in 2018 we started to establish one like system of training of staff and volunteers. So now we have developed a few programs, trainings, which all volunteers and staff who are involved in the MHPSS activities should take, and we have like separate PSS trainings as well as PFA trainings that I was mentioning. But of course we have challenge, and I think it's not only like in Ukraine, is turnover of volunteers. Like in order like to do it, you need to make like additional trainings for new volunteers. But as for now, we have pool of trainers as well as pool of instructors who conduct trainings with our like standardized program. So we have separate PSS instructors and separate PFA instructors. But of course, this like whole system is in a development phase, and I hope that in future we'll be able to develop it more. So now we also started like previously it was this training was only for people who provide MHPSS directly activities, but now we try to also teach PFA other volunteers and staff who work in different directions of the humanitarian work in our national society.
And Anna, there is also a question for you in the chat. Maybe you can answer that. Did you see this one?
Yeah, I see. Sorry, I was started to write in an answer, so I can answer here. In 2014, it was starting only like in a program. So we have separate program of like PSS provision. We do not have any like standards. So this program was based on the requirement of the donors more. But in 2018 and starting from 2018, we have separate PSS unit, and I can say that from 2018 we started to integrate MHPSS to other sectors of our national society work, and also we include PSS as a core activity of Ukrainian Red Cross Society from 2018. I hope that I'm answered to the question.
Thank you. I also like to come back to the movement's mental health and psychosocial support framework. As you know, we address needs on different levels, and we talk about the basic psychosocial needs up to more mental health needs, which need specialized services and so on. So how do we address, and this question goes to both of you actually, how do we ensure that we can address the needs on all the levels of the pyramid, and how do you go about ensuring the knowledge and quality within your staff and volunteers?
I can start. Yes, we provide psychosocial support in basic levels, and like as for now, we do not have capacity to like provide support in, for example, third or fourth layers of the pyramid. But in order to do it, we just making referral. So this year, We make guidelines for our staff and volunteers how to make referrals. Also, we make a database in regions of organizations where we can refer our beneficiaries or volunteers if we see that they need additional support. Like it's partnership with other organizations who can provide like more specialized support when it's needed.
Jane, would you like to address this one as well?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've got different levels of support that we provide staff and volunteers in Australia. So we have a sort of a basic employee assistance program which covers our staff and volunteers for the more, you know, for those sort of lower level, you know, more immediate piece of support they need. But for us, we do go up through the pyramid and partner with the Australian Psychological Society and have, you know, dedicated psychologists supporting our members and our staff and volunteers in emergencies, but also for our delegates as well, to make sure that they have that really good clinical support that they need when they are dealing with those more serious issues that they have come through. So we do try and have those different layers of support, which we think are important to provide people those options.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you have been referring to the need to support our own staff and volunteers and the systems for that. And there I would also like to hear from Signe from the Danish Red Cross. I mean, the need and how we should work to really make sure that our own well-being is taken care of. And Signe, would you like to address this question?
Yeah, and I think when I think of this question, I think you take that point of departure in the incredible dedication that that staff and volunteers are having in doing this important work for the Red Cross. So there's never a doubt that what we are engaging in is life-saving and utmost important. But we are all humans, and in many instances we are also, so staff and volunteers are also part of the very conflict or situation that we are addressing. So those elements are really something that we need to bring into to the way we care for staff and volunteers, and so this needs to be a constant awareness. We need to have systems in place that exactly also care for this. Make sure that we have debriefings and other good methods to care for staff and volunteers. And as already mentioned, of course, also effective, safe and dignified referrals if that is needed. I think also now there's many managers also present here, and I think there's the going or being in front or showing the way and really making sure that the psychosocial well-being of everyone in our system of the Red Cross is of concern, and is something that we want to address and want to talk about and make sure that we care for. I think that is some of the important aspects that we need to be mindful of. So creating psychological safe environments that allow us to have a focus on these needs of everyone in our movement. So those are some of the thoughts I have on that.
Thanks, Signe. We were also supposed to have John Labor from the Sudan Red Cross Society here this morning, and I know they have also done a lot in this field, and I know that the Danish Red Cross has also been supporting the South Sudan Red Cross Society here, but unfortunately bad connections, and I don't know whether you can address something on that, Signe, or.
Yeah, I think maybe just it has been also a journey also in the South Sudan Red Cross over many years, and they now have incredible strong capacity in working with the psychosocial support and mental health. However, equally alongside this awareness about caring for staff and volunteers have also been an increasingly important focus. And I think that is, there have been some it would be a really beautiful case for evidence in terms of how that well-being affects the ability for staff and volunteers to carry out their work. So that is maybe the level of detail I have here.
Thanks. No, this is obviously a key question. It's a matter of our own sustainability to be able to deliver our humanitarian services in many of the circumstances where we work, which are really, really difficult, and we work for years and years and years. And I just read recently that the ICRC is now up to your average length of operations where you have been present is now 36 years. And there I'd like to go back to Dominic Stillhart on this question. How do you integrate these challenges when it comes to staff support into your own programs?
Thank you, Dick. I think it's really first and the first step is recognizing the challenge. And as I said before, it sounds like obvious, but recognizing the challenge that we have an issue in terms of staff well-being is really an important first step. And it's not enough just to recognize it. We have to acknowledge it explicitly, also vis-a-vis our own staff. And we did in order to really make sure that we understand the scope of the problem, the scope of the challenge. We also did a mental health survey last year, the first of its kind, where we had over 6,000 of our staff responding. And what we found is that 40% of our staff screened for at least one mental health condition. 88% said that they were exposed to potentially traumatic events, and 35% said that they were exposed to traumatic events at the workplace. And we widely circulated the results of that survey, which was a clear sign of us as an organization really paying attention, because we first and foremost know this is important for our staff themselves, but it is also important, and I'm the director of operations, we need a healthy workforce in order to deliver the kind of results that we want to deliver for people affected by conflict and violence. So first step, recognizing, acknowledging it, and making it very clear that this is important and we want to pay attention and address it. Now, then it becomes obviously more difficult because staff well-being is a wicked problem, and there isn't a kind of a silver bullet that allows us to resolve the issue in one go or in a relatively short term. So we essentially said addressing the challenge is a mix between individual responsibilities of staff and managers, and there is a part where the organization obviously needs to take responsibility. I can talk about the way I have myself assumed responsibility as a leader, and I really started with my own team, making sure that at least once a month we have a moment where we connect, not just on business, but we just really deliberately connect and make sure we know, everybody knows where the colleagues are at. I then developed that further, and I had leadership conversations with all our country managers, asking them how they were doing, asking them what is their take on how their staff is doing in their respective delegations. And that signaled, of course, the importance that I give to mental health, but also encouraging senior managers in the field to see what they can do, what measures they can take at their level in terms of flexible work arrangements, no emails on some days, whatever works for their teams. And then at the institutional level, we have now just adopted a 4-year staff well-being plan, which includes, among others, upskilling of our managers in managing relationships in a better way, based on a values compass that we just adopted last summer. It includes a review of our processes, because one of the things that is weighing heavily on our staff, especially in the field, is the fact that they are constantly bogged down with tasks they think are not actually what they should do, because they are there to deliver services to people rather than fill in Excel sheets. So what is it that we can do in terms of creating global shared services, take out some of those transactional tasks to global shared service centers, for instance. It also includes HR policies in terms of flexible workplace and work time arrangements. And last and not least, we also obviously need to continue invest in our own mental health and psychological support system for our staff that we have significantly expanded in the past years. Now, all of this, I think we also need to recognize that we are not where we want to be. Staff well-being is a serious issue in our organization, and I think not just in it's in the sector, it's in many sectors, and what is required is a commitment over a number of years to really address it and bring it to levels that are acceptable. And it's a lot of work. It will require a lot of work and a lot of attention over a serious amount of time, period of time.
Thank you so much, Dominic. This is a very interesting case to listen to, and also your journey and how do you describe where you are, but also where you're going. And we look forward to following you on this one and holding you accountable, because it's all a matter of accountability at the end, right? Is there anyone else who has been speaking on the panel who would like to share your similar experience to Dominic? This is a spontaneous question to you. You haven't prepared, but if anyone, Jane, Sine, Michaela, you're from the ICRC, but
I'm happy to. I mean, I think that I agree with Dominic. I mean, this has to be something that we commit to, right? I mean, it's incredibly important that our staff and our volunteers feel supported. And we try to do that in Australia. We try to make talking about people's mental health and we've been particularly sort of successful in the last couple of years, just because of COVID, I guess. But it's so important to raise it and normalize it. Normalize people being able to say that they're not okay. Normalize people for people to be able to say, I'm just not going. I'm going to have to take tomorrow off, or I need to think about how I shift my work day, or how I think about workload or hours, or things like that. And I think that's the biggest, gift you can give to your staff and volunteers is just that normalizing it, allowing people to say, that they're struggling, being able to go up to staff and say, are you okay? And really listening to them say that they're not okay, creating that space for them to say that they're struggling, and then giving them the support that they need. And I think that's often something that people find challenging, because while they want to know how someone's doing, sometimes they feel fearful of what the person's going to say, that they're going to suddenly, break down in front of them. I had that with a staff member today in the office who was just distraught over workload, and so I just sat with her and let her talk. And it's a real challenge for people. But I think if we can just allow people to say that they're struggling, then that's the biggest gift, and that actually gives them the ability to start to heal themselves and start to find that support by saying it's okay to not be okay. And that's something that we try and reinforce all the time.
We also have a question in the chat regarding the diversity of the workforce that we work with. We have, I mean, we have a diversified workforce also within our organizations, and also with different cultures, different backgrounds, different religions, different ways of handling stress. How do you deal with those differences and diversities and the intersectionality of the needs?
I mean, look, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because I think people deal with these things very individually, and people from different backgrounds may find it much harder, or you know, that culturally it might be more challenging for them. So I think the best that you can do is make the tools available, you know, and to not I guess force an issue that the person is not ready to take, or force them down a path that they're not ready to take. I think it's you have to just say, here are the tools, here's the support. Try and find a way that of giving them the support that works for them culturally, or from whatever background they're from, and just listen to, rather than sort of pigeonholing anyone into, well, this is you're presenting with this particular stress, so therefore I'm going to give you solution, you know, solution B. It's actually individualizing it. And I think that's what you have to, I think that's, for me, I think that's how you address that issue of people dealing with mental health issues from very different backgrounds, is you individualize it, and you allow them, you know, you allow them to come to you in their time. Don't force them to actually tell you in the moment, oh, I'm struggling with this. If they're not ready to, just, you know, come back to them occasionally and just see how they're going, and give them that space to feel that they can finally come to you, or just provide them the information and say, here's another group that you could go to if that's going to help you. And I think that's, you know, an astute leader is going to have the ability to do that, I think.
Thanks for that answer. Thank you. I have a question for all of you out there, and who is actually taking care of your own mental health as leaders, as the top managers of the organizations? And it's an open one. Who dare to start?
I think we you know, mental health starts with our own responsibility. And if we expect that somebody takes care of us without us lead with that ourselves, is a problem. But this is as a general statement. But if I look myself as an individual, you know, the power of the family and the connection with your family, with the person who loves you, that connects with you, is such an important component to really overcome the challenges of the mental health. And I think that when we talk about these issues, sometimes we forget that we are human beings, and that one important component for us is to connect with others, to have the opportunity to sit down and to dialogue, and to enjoy a good hug of your children, or your wife, or your mother or father, or a good friend. And I think that those elements we have to make it more into the professional world, to say, this is my first component for my good mental health. And of course, you will do your sports, your yoga, your times of reflection and peace. But I think it's first you as an individual, and then you can discuss about how the institution contributes and help. And then you see the rules, the regulations that Dominic and somebody was mentioned as well, you know, the flexibility and the regulations, trying to give the space for the team to normalize, as was mentioned before, right? You also have to demonstrate your weakness as a leader. When you are tired, you have to say you are tired. When you feel that you are with an emotion, you have to have the capacity to express your emotion. And when you need a break, you will have to have the capacity to say, I need a break, because there is no such a difference between a person who is in a leadership role with a person who is in the grassroots work. It has to be more humanized in terms of how we deal with mental health or psychological support, or our own capacity and that's why I insist in the word resilience, in our own resilience in terms of how to address these issues.
Thanks for sharing, Javier. Thank you. Claire, may I ask you maybe?
Now this.
As a hand raised, sorry.
Sure, did you want to go to Senior first?
Yeah, I was trying to use the hand. Just sharing as well. So I totally agree that we all have an individual, we are working at an individual level with our mental health, but I really also think, even as a manager in our organization, there's also an accountability towards us for our well-being in a sense. And I can share that that in our employee survey, it also includes management responses, and also have a section on psychosocial well-being. So in that sense, we also at a management level have an awareness about the importance of well-being and need for addressing managers' well-being. So in that sense, I think it very much, as an organization, with our values and our culture and routines, it's also something that that needs to be in place. And then I also wanted to share that as we are in many instances in our programs, in our operation, we are really working with mental health and psychosocial support as a competence, as a programmatic area. We are also supporting sessions on psychosocial well-being for managers. So just a few days back, we facilitated a session with Ethiopian Red Cross leadership, and it was a tremendous workshop, and it was such an important time for them to recognize also their needs within taking care of their own mental health and psychosocial state in such a difficult moment of time. So I think that could be a good thing to bring with us, that yes, it is a full scale, it's staff, volunteers, it's managers, it's something that everyone needs to be comfortable around talking about and
Thanks, Sina. Claire, I asked you whether you would like to share anything also on this one.
Sure, no problem. I'm happy to share. I think, and others have sort of captured a lot of what I would have said about this anyway. When I was reflecting on this question, I think it was actually quite difficult to know how to answer, because I don't really think personally I'm a great example of this, to be honest, and I have a long way to go in terms of finding strategies to look after my own well-being as a manager, because your primary concern is generally the well-being of your team. So it's always about others. Usually, you're far less likely to spend that time thinking of your own mental health and psychosocial needs. And then by looking after others, you're also potentially amplifying your own stress responses as well. So it tends to be this sort of compound effect. And then as others have said, there's always a more urgent list of priorities. Looking after well-being is important all the time, but the unfortunate reality is that, in the moments when we need to look after well-being most, that's normally when there's the most pressure on service delivery and staff and helping others, as is the nature of the Red Cross. There are personal strategies we can adopt, but I think it's absolutely critical, just from my short experience here at the British Red Cross, that we can draw on institutional resources and expertise that's available. So Sarah's team, our wonderful psychosocial and mental health team, have developed a really holistic range of services to support staff and volunteers, including supervision and reflective practice functions. They also support our critical incidents responses for all staff and volunteers. They run a variety of different workshops, and there's other support services which are all tailored to the specific needs of individuals and teams. They work with our human resources colleagues to develop a really growing and interesting number of wellbeing resources, which is available to all. So I think it's incumbent upon us as managers to be able to utilize and understand where we can seek help in terms of the resources we have available. The British Red Cross is obviously fortunate to have this available to us. So this really needs to be prioritised within all our organisations, appropriately resourced. But more than that, it's about, I guess, us being supported by a culture that normalises this as an integrated part of our employment, including as managers. And we can also model, I think, by example, the importance of prioritising mental health and psychosocial support, as others have touched on, by showing our teams that we ourselves are proactively seeking the support we need, and actively encouraging our teams to do so as well. So I think that modelling is really important as a manager. Thanks, Dick.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is so important. And now also Richard has raised your hand and you'd like to add something. And then I will keep you, Richard, for the last question as well. So if you start here, and I will take you into a different reality just in a while.
Great, I'm going to be very brief. And that is just, what's really, so we have Sarah Davidson and this amazing team, and we obviously are aware other national societies that are on the call have a similar capacity. What's challenging is that even Sarah's team is not fully core funded. And so even in a wealthy society like ours, we have not, the sustaining is there. There's some level of core funding, but not enough. And so they have to go and raise the money to keep going. And so it just shows embedding an area of work like this absolutely as core takes time. And if it takes time in the British Red Cross, we have to ask ourselves, as we do capacity support and strengthening of our sister societies, are we serious in terms of the levels of commitment necessary to do that, and the willingness to put that into a national society strengthening plan as something absolutely critical? And bearing in mind that many of these societies are working in places much more stressful than the UK. So I think we have a way to go, but back to you.
Thanks. And now Dominic has also raised your hand to address this question on how you deal with your own stress, right? Is that correct?
Indeed, yes.
Yes.
Yes, Dick, thank you. Well, I think, Claire, I really like the way you put it. It is a struggle. It is difficult, and I also have the impression we are. At least I grew up, and I think our organizational culture still sort of incentivizes the strong, superhuman kind of leader who can deal with everything, and then tells their staff, of course, I'm taking care of my health, I'm running, I'm gardening, I'm doing all sorts of yoga and stuff. And then you put even more pressure on all these people who really struggle because they see you not only working like a superhuman, they also have to, and in addition, he has a family, he is gardening. And I think there is something that is not quite right in terms of how we set incentives, and there is a responsibility. Again, and here I fully agree with Javier, it is our responsibility to work on that culture and to message something different, and not to message, the one who works every weekend and sends messages is really, he or she is on top of everything. We need to start also messaging differently, and we need to value people who say, And I had someone in my team who said, look, I really don't feel well. I need to step out and aside for 4 or 5 months to just take care of myself. And I just really thought that team member, he had the courage to say it publicly, to do it, to come back, and we reintegrated him. And I really thought he was leading by example much more than I could ever have done myself. So one way for me to take care of myself is really, I know that I need to resource myself, and I do every year a retreat of several days where I just, with the help of a coach, ask myself, what matters now to me? What do I want to focus on? And these are, even if it's just 2 or 3 days, it's tremendously helpful. It's like going to a fuel station and fill your tank. And that works for me. I'm not saying it should work for everyone, but that is something that I highly value. My last point, Dick, and I know I may be too long, is that I think we as leaders probably have one advantage, which is that we are working in fulfilling roles, and we can influence, and we can, our roles are generally, I find, extremely fulfilling. And the topic of today, mental health and psychosocial care, if I look where we've come from and what we have achieved collectively, I think we can be proud of it. And I know there is more work to be done, but that's just an example of how we have collectively, as leaders of the movement, managed to influence and shift the cursor really in the right direction. And I find that hugely motivating and inspiring.
Thank you so much, Dominic, for sharing this. And I fully agree. We sometimes we just need to stop and consider and take stock and move forward. And I think we are doing great here. And Michaela, you had raised your hand as the last speaker on this point. Then we will actually move into the Q&A session to allow everybody in to ask any questions. So please, Michaela.
Very short. I think I'm going to try to bring probably this humanitarian dimension. No? We are confronted in our activities to very big moral dilemmas. It's decisions that change lives sometimes. And I think that at least in the ICRC context where we work, is something that puts people really at stake. These decisions are huge, and it does imply the destiny of a group of people or communities. So they are extremely big. And sometimes I think that we, and Javier, I do like the way you express family as a pillar for that support. But it's true that sometimes I find myself a little bit explaining these aspects to my family. Sometimes it's a little bit cumbersome. And there is where I turn back to my peers. And I think that apart from family as a peer, as a pillar that supports me, is our peers that do understand the context where we work, the decisions that we have to take, and just being able to discuss with them the decisions taken, or sharing with them the decisions that we have to take, really brings me a peace of mind and a lot of strength. And last but not least, and I think it was mentioned by Dominique, this idea that, yes, we have plenty of situations and moral dilemmas in which we are confronted, but there is this other aspect, is the moral bliss and the activities that we do and the satisfactions that they bring to us, and how can that bring us energy and a little bit of this centralized part of the well-being. So I wanted to bring that into account as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michaela. And this really also confirms the policies and kind of framing of that we are resilient as people as long as we have our peers around us, and as long as we can actually relate to other human beings. And that is our kind of primary source of support, and safety and trust is key. So it's really nice to hear all of you, and thank you so much all of you for sharing, because I think you as leaders will also show the way. Showing vulnerability, showing that you're human is probably also key to set the standards for the whole organization. I would now invite Sarah, sorry, no, we will actually show a video. It's a video, sorry. for this confusion. Now, we have a message from the colleagues in Canada. And it's, let's see, I forgot the name. It's the head of human resources, and her name is Anne Clancy. And so they couldn't attend today, so they actually recorded a message for all of us. So please start the video. He's not here.
Hello, I'm Anne Clancy, Chief People Officer at the Canadian Red Cross. Thank you for providing this time for me to join you over video. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land I'm speaking to you from is the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. We also call it Ottawa in Ontario, Canada. A land acknowledgement is a statement recognizing that the land we live and work on is the unceded territory of Indigenous nations and peoples. It is also an acknowledgement that the Canadian Red Cross recognizes the history of the nation, our status as guests on this land, and that Indigenous peoples still occupy their territory and continue to experience the ongoing effects of colonialism. I'm grateful to be speaking with you today about our commitment to mental health and psychosocial support at the Canadian Red Cross and within the Red Cross Red Crescent movement. Crises do not affect people equally. Often in a crisis, traditional community and other protective supports may be eroded or under strain at a time when they are most needed. From our experience, we understand that holistic support to communities includes mental health and psychosocial support. For the past 5 years, the Canadian Red Cross has evolved its mental health and psychosocial programming specifically focused on building community capacity in a way that is scalable and adaptable to different contexts. Recognizing the importance that local mental health service providers and agencies have on enhancing the capacity of community-based psychosocial recovery, the Canadian Red Cross has channeled over $25 million since 2013 through community grants from mental health service providers and agencies working on well-being initiatives. In light of the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially its impact on the mental health of youth and seniors, the adoption of the mental health and psychosocial policy at the 2019 statutory meetings could not have been more timely. Response to the shifting needs of the pandemic has required extraordinary adaptability. Since the COVID-19 pandemic began, Canadian Red Cross has recruited over 50 mental health professional team members, supported by over 500 safety and well-being volunteers to assist with growing mental health and psychosocial needs. This team has been instrumental in training over 500 staff and volunteers in managing protection issues, as well as over 8,500 personnel oriented in basic psychosocial support, reinforcing our holistic support to communities. They have supported 5 emergency recovery operations, 3 programs, and over 40 relief operations, both at home and abroad. Together, they've reached more than 35,000 people impacted by emergencies, delivering nearly 5,000 external referrals to community-based programs and services to support mental health and psychosocial well-being. Their impact is undeniable. In addition, we offer psychological first aid training for the general public. These trainings teach people how to build up resilience to stress and establish coping strategies for stress and trauma. Since 2019, we've trained close to 12,000 people on psychosocial first aid, with more than 4,400 receiving their certification. As we move forward into another year of an unprecedented pandemic, compounded by an increasing number of disasters brought about by a changing climate, we anticipate the gap in mental health and psychosocial support persisting in Canada for those most marginalized and excluded among us. As such, we continue to explore opportunities to diversify our funding, be it through government partners or foundations. We adapt and evolve our approach by integrating psychosocial support and protection, gender, and inclusion across programs and services. Finally, and most importantly, we will continue to dedicate resources to support our staff and volunteers with their well-being. Our people are essential, and we must serve their well-being so that they, in turn, can serve the well-being of others. We are committed to supporting the movement on its efforts to implement and advance mental health and psychosocial support. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please reach out to us.